Hello, everybody. This is Brian, the Keto Newbie, checking in on behalf of Dr. Carl Goldkamp today. In today's episode, I actually have a conversation with the doctor about a couple of things that I was thinking about and wanted to consider when looking into a protein-sparing fast, which I will actually be undergoing myself for about 3 or 4 days. I'd like to take a quick second to invite everybody to join our Keto Naturopath Facebook group. To find us, just click the search bar and type in Keto Naturopath. And if you have any questions, please drop by to the website, ketonaturopath.com, under contact, and leave any questions that you might have there pertaining to this episode, anything covered in the past, or if you just have any questions in general that you want to leave for the doctor. Thanks. I hope you enjoy and have a great day.
Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp. If you're interested in learning about the ketogenic diet like I was, to save my own life, then this is probably the podcast for you. 8 years ago, I knew nothing about it. 6 years ago, it saved my life. 3 years ago, I started researching and talking with some of the authorities in the field and attending medical conferences about this to understand why and how keto so dramatically changed my and my wife's Judi's lives. The purpose of this podcast is to share our journey of discoveries with you and understanding how keto is so effective in improving so many different conditions, from obesity, epilepsy, diabetes, infertility, MS, Alzheimer's, heart disease, to name a few. So take a step away from all the hype you've probably heard and roll up your sleeves with me and join me weekly to explore this living miracle that anyone can access. We'll talk science, we'll talk food. We'll explore its history and evolution to today, which is that the sheer wonder of the ketogenic way of eating has changed untold number of lives, unlike anything before it. And in case I forget to mention it, please join our Facebook group, Keto Naturopath.
What is the focus that you want to do?
Well, first things first, I would like to get back to some basics real quick. One of the first things I noticed since recording what food and stuff that I had throughout the week so far is that I'm not quite reaching what I had set out for my protein numbers. I'm definitely doing okay as far as caloric intake. I'm definitely eating enough. I'm not reaching my desired numbers for macros, which for me, for protein, is 30% of my total caloric consumption.
Okay, so when you
per
do
day.
that, Brian, so let's back up. So your objective is what? Sort of to put it out there like as a masking tape over the top of the file. Brian's objective is?
I just want to see what the effects are for me from switching from a higher fat diet to doing a protein sparing fast for about a week. One thing that I'm curious about is, when initially we had started off and, I was venturing into getting into keto, that was something that I had signed up for 60 days. At this particular point, I'm going on the better part of almost four-ish months now. Doing keto. I've dropped about 40-ish pounds, like somewhere in the neighborhood. I fluctuate between like 40 and 43 as far as total lost. But I was just curious as to why it was that for me to start this, am I doing this for just a week? Is this like a reasonable sample size, or am I going into this under the impression of, if I do this, it's going to be, temporary. It's going to be for shorter stints than I would as far as like my regular diet.
Let me put some definitions here with terms. So this part is the protein sparing fast. And so we just did this last week for just 4 days. So I know what the effects are, even with me and then with Judi, and we're very different people, different genders for sure. That the protein sparing modified fast, that's the whole title, meaning you're taking protein, but you're not doing fats or anything else. So it's a fast in all other context of the word. But what I find the definitive difference is the proteins you use. And so when we talk about what proteins to use, it's like chicken without the skin. It's eggs without the yolk. It's pork without the fat around the side, because those are easy things. It's fish for the most part, or it's the sardines or the mackerel that you can add apple cider vinegar to. So that's how sparing we are in the fat, but there are whole food sources of fat. So as opposed to doing a quote unquote protein sparing modified fast with ribeye or with porterhouse or with what else? Or with, I mean, salmon would be fine because it's a fish, it's a fatty fish. But, what we're trying to do is trim out the conspicuous aspects of the fat for a couple days. So for me, and we did it this last week, and primarily because Judi struggles with her weight. She comes from a family of huge diabetics. I was about to say, they're so huge that you wouldn't know if they fell down. They're that big, and then, so she's really struggled with it in a number of generations. And so it is different, and as well as being a different gender. So we both had benefits. So for 4 days, we did the chicken, the white egg, the egg whites, the pork, and the sardines. And so I dropped 5 pounds. I'm 166 down to 159. Forgot what she did, but she says she can't do anything, and she's always said, no, this never worked, this never worked. I said, let's be real specific. So she dropped 2 to 3 pounds. So now let's do this every week for 3 or 4 days, and that's fine. So now to you, what exactly are you implementing? And what, we need to know. I'm all about the details. I'm the data guy. So what exactly are you doing?
As far as what my plans are for the protein sparing fast, or
what
am
you
I
did do for the
currently
past
doing?
week?
For the past week, all I have been doing is just my typical stuff as far as a ketogenic diet. I'm actually not going to be able to start doing the protein fast until this upcoming week. So for me, it's been 65% fat, 30% protein, with 5% or less of
Okay,
carbs.
so when you talk that way, I mean, there's two languages, I find that like two buses that go by each other, and they're both in the keto lane. And one is talking in percents, because I don't know what that means. The way I talk about protein is grams of protein per kilogram of ideal body weight. That's kind of what's out there, and that's how people research it. So when they go, oh, my protein is, percent this, percent that, I go, I don't swim in that language. I don't, it just doesn't, compute. And a lot of people do. And so can you calculate, for a guy your age and height and everything else, how much protein you're doing per kilogram of body weight, of ideal body weight? So let's say Brian's, you're 5'6", are you in, I think?
5'5". I'm like just a hair below.
Okay, we'll call it 5'6". So 5'6", and I don't know what that is for ideal, but my guess is your ballpark protein needs would be around 90 grams a day. I mean, I didn't figure that out, but I'm probably not off by much.
90 grams a day. Okay, so we're looking at 90 grams a day. I'm actually opening up my chronometer right now, and we're going to go to the very first day where I started actually checking this out. Day 1 was 83 grams.
Okay, so I'd say that, and this is, I'd have to go check it, but we're pretty close with 90. And so what 90 is a 12-ounce ribeye. Well, forget the ribeye, the fat. So yeah, in the terms of protein, it's a 12-ounce ribeye, subtract the fat. So you're probably a little under the protein that you require, is my guess.
Okay.
And probably not off by much.
And you said it was 1.5 grams per kilogram.
I look at what as a minimal. I go 1.5 to up to 2 grams, but I calculate ideal body weight, which you can do it online, and then I go, all right, here's the bottom. I don't want any less than this. And if one is doing a protein sparing modified fast only, then I let them go, hey, don't worry about the upper limit. Eat until you're no longer hungry. So if you have a lunch, you have a dinner, or whenever you do your protein things, have it so you're not hungry. Just work on not being hungry. And it's usually higher. And then you'll find that you're probably losing fat. So I take the upper limit off it. I tend not to be so macro oriented, other than, hey, we're not doing fats, we're not doing carbs. All we got are whole food sources of protein. So go for it and take off the conspicuous fats.
Okay. So, all right. So according to this, my ideal weight, which to me is kind of wild. I haven't actually weighed this much since I was a wrestler in my senior year of high school, 136 pounds for my height. And it's saying that that's going to be, let me see, 61 kilograms. And we're saying at least 1.5. Wow. You pretty much nailed it. It's 91.5.
The 1.5,
grams.
yeah.
Very nice,
You
Doc.
go through it
Very
now if you
nice.
kind of memorize the numbers.
Right.
So there's that. And so what I say is, all right, so, this is not rocket science. So use 90 as your bottom and figure out what 90 is in terms of, we're talking about the protein sparing modified fast, setting yourself up for a week. Really, even generally macros, 90 is your bottom. And during those 3 or 4 days or a whole week, whatever you want to do, you have that as your bottom and just eat until you're not hungry. And so you'll probably never double it. It's hard to eat too much protein. You'll probably go up to maybe 130 and 140, and I doubt even that high on any given day. So, and the choices I've come down to are pork, because you can trim off the fat around the side, pork loin. You obviously the egg whites. And then I also say, if you're going to make an omelet, do like 1 real egg with the yolk and 4 egg whites. And so you got a little fat in there. So we're not being devoid of fat. We're being realistic. And we don't want you to go to protein powders or any of the other crap. We're just trying to be a little more holistic. Fish is fine, especially if you do the canned salmon, tuna, and mackerel and sardines. Try to discourage tuna due to the mercury. Salmon's fine. And we used to tell people to add mayo and add C8. Now we're saying add some apple cider vinegar. This isn't like a now and then. We're saying for this particular situation, don't add the fat. But if you add apple cider vinegar, you'll like it a lot more.
Okay. No, that works for me. If you hear me typing, I know my keyboard's a little loud. I'm actually typing out some of the foods that you're recommending here as we have this conversation. But this is actually going to be kind of interesting for me because I'm kind of at the point where I feel like I have bottomed out in terms of my potential with my present diet. Although I could say with pretty solid confidence that I'm sure if all I did was manipulate what macros I had and stayed pretty stringent to that, I would probably be able to get more out of what I'm doing. But this is actually pretty interesting considering. I mean, you're saying Judy's wanting to do this for at least a few days, a week, almost every week. That's actually kind of interesting to hear. This is something that somebody who has who is very deep in the life in terms of keto would actually be looking forward and looking towards this to get personal results. I think
yeah. Well, her motivation. besides being a woman, her whole thing is that she had a meningioma and it pressed up against the pineal gland, pituitary gland, sorry. And so that really made a lot of her hormones kind of messed up. And so I think she's trying to come back from that. But anyways, it's not effective. Whatever we do is not as effective for her as it is with me. And so every time I say, hey, let's do this. And she goes, no, I've already tried that. And I said, no, let's really do this. And so this time we really did it this way. And she goes, lost some weight. So now she's into it, now, despite the fact that she thought she did this 100 times. Now she's into it. And so I'm fine with it. And so we have, so she's really good for the cook. But so we do, I love the chicken breast that she does. The pork is really good too. For a snack / lunch, it's, you get your can of sardines or mackerel, take out a couple cans, mush them together, add in some apple cider vinegar, which also helps to sensitize your insulin, merely as an aside. It is very effective. So as they say, when mom is happy, everybody's happy. So she's found, and it's a tool. We just finished up with the next group of guys that came through, and in the last 3 weeks, we ended up at a protein sparing modified fast. And initially they said, oh, I wish we did this earlier. I would have lost more weight. But now we had this sort of summary talk and so on and so forth. I said, no, it was perfect because they needed to be fat adapted. So at the beginning of the program, we said, have all the fat you can, max out your fat macro. We're going to box in your metabolism so you become fat adapted sooner than later. And those who did better on they got more gains. Everybody got a gain. They got more gains on the protein sparing modified fast. So once you're fat adapted, which you have been, Brian, now this is a tool that in the course of you can do it in any situation. You also can keep yourself from being ostracized in any particular social. You go, I'll just do the chicken or the fish and I'm good. And people see you sitting down and don't feel you're like shunning their carbs or cake or whatever. Say, no, I'm good.
Now, I know that for me, one of the most attractive things and one of the things that I grew to love the absolute most in terms of anything involving a low carb or a keto lifestyle was the other benefits that come along with, losing the weight. At this particular juncture, losing weight isn't as important to me as my ability to get, restful sleep or dealing with less physical pain and having any of my inflammation and things of that nature not affecting me as deeply as before. Should I be anticipating any changes in terms of the other additional benefits that I have already gotten from following a keto
There is a
lifestyle?
shift. There is a shift, I think, when you take a real conscious approach to saying, all right, we're really not doing fat this week. We're not doing conscious fat for, I don't know, this week or 3 or 4 days. I don't really think you have to do more than 3 or 4 days, but you can try it for a week. What I like about it is there's no damage being done. But I think you're going to notice a sleep difference. Did I notice it? I don't think so. I don't think Judi did either, but suddenly there's this, just like when you took away the carbs, your kidneys had to adjust, it's like, whoa, and suddenly you needed to add salt on the things you used and so on. With fat, you're going to find like, I had the same amount of protein that I usually had, but I'm still hungry. So you're probably going to have to have more protein. At least when I went to bed, I went to bed fuller. I think my sleep was as deep, but you will notice a sense. Yeah, I don't think there's certainly nothing in the way of pain. All this, don't I wish it was easy to take something like CRP, your glucose, your ketones, your insulin, and your CRP. That would be great, but never going to happen for a while. But because you'd see that this would further be an anti-inflammatory. So depending on if one had inflammation and what that inflammation was from, then that would probably drop.
Now, we had discussed this a little bit in private, about a week or so ago, and I had asked about if there were any supplements that I should be looking to acquire or to partner up with what it is that I'm going to be doing diet-wise for the few days once I do actually start this. What exactly would you be recommending as far as that is concerned?
The only thing that really is always the number one, you can say electrolytes, and some people don't need to do anything about it. It's like, yeah, they're fine. I do think, and I do use salt. I was never a salt guy in my life ever. And so in doing this, and I like coffee, and that's not necessarily, I like a lot of coffee. And so for me, I'm conscious of actually putting salt in my coffee, and that kind of cuts the bitterness. It's also adding the sodium that makes up for the difference. It's kind of a natural way to having more sodium. And I actually don't put it on my food, but Judi puts it on afterwards. But other than that, I would say, depending on if the only thing I've found, people who drink as much coffee as myself, that they will probably get cramps, toes, feet kind of thing. And if they're only doing it for 3 or 4 days, they probably won't notice it at all. So what does that mean? It means they, like we mentioned before, take magnesium. That could be magnesium, citrate, malate, glycinate, all those are fine. And it's this, again, it's not rocket science, but the cramps that they're going to feel, and there's one woman that we've been working with who's a little bit of an exception, that we actually have her do just table salt. She could do sea salt if she wanted to, but she brought in light salt, which is a potassium source. So I wanted to make sure she had enough potassium. So sometimes if this is the first sort of exposure, I sort of doubt it. I'm going to go on an assumption that people, the collective audience are talking to, has already done keto and they're already fat adapted. Well, then there's probably not much more they're going to have to do at all relative to what they're doing. If they've never had to do electrolytes, meaning salt, potassium, maybe sometimes, or magnesium, then they'll probably have to consider it now. But if it's only for 3 or 4 days, I would say let it be as natural as possible. Just focus on the source of protein and make it fun and doable. So it shouldn't be an exercise in discipline. If you're still hungry, go eat more.
Okay. Okay. Easy enough. Now, and I know you said make it fun, and I know that that means a lot of different things to a lot of people when it comes to food. In terms of things like, seasonings and stuff like that, are we drawing a line anywhere in terms of what it is that I can do with
No,
it?
we use a lot of seasoning. And so if your seasoning's natural, meaning it is pepper and it is herbs and so on and so forth, go for it. And I think that is the case with you and your background.
Mm.
Absolutely. The more, the better. And learn the tricks of your heritage kind of thing. That's what we do. So oddly, I've people who use salt generally in life put it on their foods. I've never put salt on my foods. I put it in my coffee.
Hmm.
And so that would be the only thing that I would sort of, if one gets cramps, it's drink more fluids for one, and put salt in it, and magnesium. So I do take I mentioned about coffee, I do take magnesium and a CalMag. So I do magnesium glycinate, malate, and separately CalMag once a day before I go to bed. Some people think it helps you sleep. In Chinese medicine, you take your minerals at night and you take your herbs in the morning. It kind of goes along with that. So that's about it. It's hard to screw it up. You won't get into any emergencies. If you get some cramps, they're easy to treat. In the first case, you get cramps, drink water. Second case, put salt in your coffee or water. With salt, potassium, that should take care of 90% of it. Other than that, take a magnesium supplement.
Now, in terms of because I'm sure at some point or another while I do this, I'm going to be the sucker that ends up trying to do something with ground beef because for whatever reason I can't get enough of that stuff. Should I be leaning more towards like the 95%?
I would for
lean?
these, for this particular bracket of time. Yeah, try to make it lean. So everything's lean, and now you're going to choose all the foods you never chose before because they're too normal.
One thing that I'm actually going to be looking forward to a little bit is getting a little more sardine in my life. I've only recently just crossed the threshold to eating sardines, and I've become very quickly obsessed with them. So it's definitely a nice one to have in my back pocket.
It is the
for sure,
go-to food. Absolutely is the go-to food. If you had to live for a month of doing this, it would be sardines. You got some fats in there and so on, but sardines are, you get your calcium, you got so many good things in sardines. But mackerels are a close second, but sardines are actually unique. And they're not that polluted, like in the sense of tuna fish and swordfish, everything else. You don't have to worry about it.
Definitely good to know. So this doesn't seem like it's actually going to be incredibly difficult for me at this particular juncture. I mean, I know as a quick comparison, when I first tried hopping back on the wagon for keto, I tried sort of doing something similar to this. I just said, "Oh, hey, I'm gonna just try to restrict my carbs," and because I didn't really have much in the way of fat sources at the time, it was basically just chicken breast and things like that, and it felt a little challenging to me. I mean, granted, I was still going through the growing pains of becoming fat adapted again, but you know, what was it? I think it was it was last weekend. I didn't really have a whole lot of time Friday, just due to work and everything. And I came home. First thing we did was clean the apartment. Just sort of went about my night. I managed to skip the entire day without eating. Woke up Saturday. I had a cup of coffee and, like a bad vegetative person, just started playing video games. And I was pretty much lost out there and I managed to make it almost 40 hours without a meal, and I felt completely fine. So, I feel like this version of, well, before I continue, effectively what's happening here is my body is believing that I'm fasting, even though I am eating.
That's right. Exactly right. And also, my reframe has been over all these years of doing it and working with other people, as much as we collectively think, well, this is kind of weird how I started this diet and it has all these benefits. I now try to reframe it by saying, no, this is actually you going back to how it should have been. And I'm not, there's no glory to the diet. It's like that. It's just that there's too much history behind this. There's too much support behind this to think otherwise, and say now specifically, we're talking about the lower fat protein is like, okay, there was times in which where whatever epoch you want to put yourself in archaeologically is that this is when they had those, pemmican jawbreakers that they put in their little satchel, and they chewed on, really dried meat for a number of days. This is what this is. And it seems very appropriate. And then, of course, there's times in which they didn't eat anything and they were lucky enough to have enough water. But this whole idea of going with low fat is not like, oh my gosh, these guys are really being artificial, contrived. Not at all. I think this is actually, you go without these moments of a particular macro, and there's very few carbs that one would have ever. I think archaeologically, I'm speaking now, certainly before the last 10,000 years, that, this is fine. This is kind of how people lived. And so now when we go back to how, the many millennia that we developed our genes through, this makes perfect sense. Socially, though, it does not make perfect sense. Socially, we're in a whole different place. Let's go to McDonald's. Let's go out. Let's go do this other thing. Well, that's, obviously not how our genes grew up.
Now, one thing that I actually wanted to touch back on really quick about what I was saying with fasting. Outside of me being able to consume food, would you say that what the effects or what actually ends up happening in my body is more or less the same as actual fasting? Like if I actually went on a legitimate fast for, say, 2 or 3 days, does your body undergo more or less the exact same changes? Or, I mean, what are the biggest differences between doing something like a protein sparing fast versus actually fasting outside of?
I would say it does. In the sense, fasting, I think your body responds to lack of carbs. That's the first sort of like when you start dropping your carbs or have no carbs, which is what keto is for the most part, and in various degrees of keto, your body goes, what just happened? So that's where the ketones come from. So you don't have to go fatless, obviously, to get to ketone production, but ketone production comes out when there's no carbs. And so when you look at it, there's really just 2 fuels. It's carbs, which goes to glucose. But proteins are really interesting. So proteins are, I can't remember if it's 21 or 22, and arguably 8 or 9 essential, is that the distance between glucose and a protein, there are some amino acids that your body will respond glycemically, meaning just like glucose at 100%. And how they know that is that when they measure your breath, everything's what they call a respiratory quotient. It's either going to be, and it's the amount of carbon dioxide over oxygen. Right? So they measure carbon dioxide, they measure oxygen. To the degree that's a one-on-one relationship, equal amount of carbon dioxide, equal amount of oxygen, O2, that means you are burning carbs primarily. And when you're down to 70, and arguably 0.69, that means, so they're measuring just in your breath, what you're expelling, that you're burning fats. So they've done this, right down the whole amino acid chain, and there's a number of amino acids that respond just as if you were eating glucose or carbs. And because, your body, and that goes to your body can make as much glucose as it wants, and glucose as this fuel is kind of like a protein in disguise, if you will. It's slightly modified, boom, you got it. So it's never a stress of the body to make its own glucose. It's never a question. So if you're out of glucose, not a problem. We got it. We got that covered. So the 2 fuels are, it's either fat, which is really the keto source, right? The ketone source, or it's carbs and proteins, and really they're the same stuff. So when you look at it that way, and that's how the ketogenic diet was, they actually added up the grams of carbs and fat, the carbs and proteins together versus the amount of fat. And so you would get ratio diets. They're like a 4-to-1, so it's fats, then carbs and proteins together. A 4-to-1, a 3-to-1, a 2-to-1. And that's how they'd measure it. Because carbs and proteins are so close to each other, and some proteins are burned exactly the same efficiency by that respiratory quotient will come out the same way. So there's not much you have to do other than not have the fat, and because then your body goes, all right, we'll burn our own fat. You're not telling us what to do, we'll burn our own fat. And that's pretty much it. So in the bigger picture, when we look at protein modified sparing fast, it's the same thing. It's just like, hey, you're having a little more cumbersome way of eating carbs, if you ask me. And some people who have done this, they said, yeah, I did lose weight, but my glucose readings, because they're doing glucometer readings, came up a little bit. I'm usually 85 and I was doing in my mid 90s. Why is that? Well, the protein you were eating was quickly changed, digested too, even though there's cost of digesting proteins. So that's why. It's not a bad thing, certainly not huge or high, but they'd still lost the fat, which is really usually the motivation for doing this.
Very cool. Now I know that previously, and I don't know if you still currently stand on this position, but I know that in previous conversations and previous podcasts, you would recommend trying a fast every so often, throughout your year. Would this be something that you could do in place of that? And if that is the case, or even if it isn't even if it isn't the case, would you still recommend doing something like this with some frequency, be it for maintenance, so to speak, or maybe other health benefit
I
reasons?
would. So I've fasted twice at 7 days, and number 3-day fast, and Judi, my wife, feels more need to do that because she has more difficulty with her weight than me. This is such a relief. I don't like fasting. I don't like going 3 days without fasting. Yeah, I can do it, but I did it, done it, documented it, as I say, got the t-shirt, but I don't want to do that anymore. This is absolutely the thing that I would put in place of that. Unless Judi felt, hey, we're going to go without for a day or two, fine. We can go up to do our fast. But I find this is all the same benefits. In fact, I think more, because there's somebody, Steve Finney, who works for, he can plug him in. He's done a lot of work on this, and now he works for Verta Health. He's the first to say, fasting isn't not necessarily healthy. Anything beyond a 3-day fast, you're starting to digest your own protein, meaning your muscle. So if you're eating protein, you've now protected your muscle. So you're not digesting, you're not breaking down, you're not losing any muscle mass. You're losing lean tissue only because that's a vague term. Lean tissue means if you're not eating anything, you have less in your gut, and so that's less lean tissue. It's kind of a vague reference. But you're not losing any muscle mass. So I think it has a big upside, and it has the same upside of fat loss, which is why people generally fast. And it has the other upside is you don't lose any muscle mass.
Nice. Okay, because that's something that was a little bit of a concern for me. One thing I was really surprised by was that when I first started measuring and doing everything with keto in the beginning, is that I actually saw, even though I was not working out or lifting weights or anything like that, I did see a slight increase in terms of muscle mass, which I thought was kind of counterintuitive, considering that I was getting a quote unquote lesser diet, so to speak, in terms of what I was putting into my body. Of course, my thinking in terms of what you need to build muscle or to sustain muscle was a totally different animal then than it is now. But this being something that you only do for short periods of time, I mean, are there versions of this that people actually practice or use lifestyle wise in terms of diet, where you've seen similar things, or is it pretty consistent that you just don't really lose very much muscle mass at all?
Yeah, no, I think that, as I say, so for you, if you maintained at least your 90, and once you eyeball what 90 is in terms of all those things we talked about, then you're good. No, I don't see any downside. And how long people could do this? They could do this for weeks on end. They could do it a month. Whereas I would not be saying that about a fast. I would say, the reason we got into this, on Judi's side, she's always, she's gained back, lost, and so she's much more a different situation than mine in my situation. But the reason we do this is because people who are drawn to fasting, as in nothing, a water fast, are people who have high addiction. They're coming away from drugs, coffee, anything. They're just these drivers. It's all or nothing. They can have a have a crazy life, nondescript, and they don't care about their diet, but they're going to fast for a month and it'll all be good. And that's their kind of attitude. And they'll go beyond what's safe or necessary and get themselves in potentially trouble. And I've seen this. We've had some former students this way, and you got to pull them back. So I've been less about supporting these kind of fasts, and obviously intermittent fasting. It's too bad it shares the same kind of name, but time restricted eating is fine, and everybody does that, and they should do that. But in terms of multi-day fasts, multi-week fasts, no, I don't see a reason for it. I see the downside. It can be very great, but it attracts people who tend to want to do one thing that's going to correct their life. So they're very, I hate to say it this way, they see the world very superficially. They see their health very superficially, and they think that this will change everything. And so it allows me to plug in something else to that kind of personality that would be far safer and far more beneficial. So if they did this for a month, I'd prefer them not to go that long, and I have no particular hard evidence why I'd wish that, but start off small and see how it works. Everybody's so different that you don't know when somebody's going to freak out because of something or other, or something. So, but anyway, this is far, far, far safer than a full-on fast.
Very cool. I'm actually looking forward to giving this a shot and seeing what changes. If there are any changes, I understand that everybody's a little different, and not everybody will actually get the same results to this. If I have any results at all or not. Please. So definitely going to be looking.
Yeah, when you think of fluids, when you think of, gosh, you can take a few cans of sardines with you, and with or without the. It's always nice to add the apple cider vinegar because they're kind of. It depends how you like sardines, but I mean, you don't need much to make this work, really.
No, I'm seeing that now, and this is even simpler than keto. I mean, it's kind of hard to make to mess it up.
No, and I think what this is, this is evidence of, this is the truth of how we can get by and how people did get by, how mankind did get by for all our. I was reading about the Pleistocene a while ago, but I mean, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I mean, this is how pretty much they ate. So anyway, yeah, by all means, get back. Measure. It's, I love documents of you put your weight, or what you're going to notice is your belly fat. However thin or fat you think you are, this is your own thing. Grab that once a day. This is kind of the same as measuring your waist, if you even have any fat on your waist as a guy. But you're going to find that's going to disappear. It's going to melt away.
I'm definitely going to be looking forward to this one, especially since right now we're all in quarantine. New Jersey is an absolute hotbed for people advocating for staying in, just because of our numbers are pretty outrageous at the present moment. Not outside of what I'm able to do here at home, which is maybe some body weight stuff here or there. I don't really have, the same means of being able to do things physically that help me take care of myself, be it rock climbing, jujitsu, going to the gym. Right. So, doing something for myself at this particular juncture just kind of feels right. And I'm looking forward to it and feeling very hopeful.
I think it should be dramatic. In fact, you bring up a really good point. We are all locked in. And I think people go two ways. They can't tolerate it, and it just get fed up, whether themselves or their partner or their situation, or they actually use this as an extraordinary opportunity to do something they didn't have the willingness to have sort of a consistency to. So that would be diet. They always said, well, I got to go to work and do all this. So, well, no, here you are. Buy all the food you need. So now so certain things can be done and certain habits can be established. Family size, individually wise, and it's like, so people have taken this on, and other things like this, of course, to really make a difference. And they go, holy smoke. So it's a great place to take away some lessons for that other life that we think will happen eventually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I figure we're going to be having all this time to ourselves, and, why not make this the perfect opportunity to have a transformation, if that's something that you're looking to do. I mean, there's so much more time now that, we as a population have just generally have now. Definitely try to make the most of it.
Absolutely. Well, this is good, Brian. I look forward to it. We should have a follow-up and tell us, what you did and didn't do or what worked out for you, because it's got to be real world. This isn't putting people on some Mars and has special diet. It works into one's life. And by the way, yeah, you're one of the few people that are actually working and going outside your house. So you're unique in that regard as well as others.
Oh yeah, first of all, I feel very fortunate to be, among, one of the few people right now that are able to regularly get some work in right now. But being able to get some perspective in terms of how I'm feeling throughout the day. One of those things that we had discussed back when I had originally was having these conversations with you was that, at some point I was going to have, so to speak, a higher sense of what's actually going on with my body in terms of how I feel throughout the day, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, things like that. You know, for me, going to work isn't necessarily the most stress-free thing. So being able to figure out, how this might affect me in terms of, my mood, the amount of energy that I have, things like that. These are all things that I'm absolutely looking forward to, getting a better finger on the pulse, so to speak, and being able to take some notes down and all of that, because all of that stuff matters.
Absolutely
to me.
right. Absolutely right. Well, good. So till next time, I think it's neat your experiments that you do, with my, and that you're nice enough to ask for my advice.
Hey, I figure I have a great resource. It would be foolish of me to not try to take advantage.
I'll go with that. I'll leave it at that one.
All right. Hey, you have a great day,
Take care,
Carl.
Ryan.
Thank you again.
Hi, this is Dr. Goldcamp. I just wanted to encourage you to send in your questions to drgoldcamp at ketonaturopath.com. Many of you have, and so what I've done with these questions that gotten back to most of the people I email, but some of the questions that were so good, and if they were overlapping to other questions, I would combine them and try to put that into the topic of a podcast, either via one of the micro topics that are covered in an interview. As you know, we cover a lot of topics in any given interview, or some of my own sort of reporting, if you will, on some of these issues. So please keep the questions coming. Feel free to send in an email, and I will get back to you. One thing I want to say, a number of questions have come in which I've given this answer and the email didn't work. So just make sure that you're receiving at the same email that you sent it in. And I think that might have been the difficulty. So I look forward to your questions. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I'm open to answer your questions. And I think this world of keto is not just black and white. It's nice that it's simple, but it's not simple for some. I'm really trying to, go down as any of you who have listened to all my podcasts. We started way back when, history and evolution and epilepsy and so on and so forth. Now we're seeing some tremendous overlap in various mental disorders, such as schizophrenia or neurological disorders that are not just epilepsy. And also, just for people in losing weight, it's sometimes pretty complicated for them to engage in keto. And so they need some help. And so that's the whole point of, at least that's what I think I'm doing, is exploring the world of why are there other factors. And so in exploring some of those other factors, we've covered addiction, we've covered hormones, we've covered nutritional deficiencies, we've covered certain metabolic lab results, and we'll go further. We'll even get to more on genome and aspects. So these are all just contributions that make for an obstacle for some people to engage easily in the ketogenic diet. This is my belief, and these are the things that I've discovered. And I think other people have discovered some of these things, but not ever put them together. So stay listening, send in your questions, and I will definitely get back to you.